The live stream has started. Who's the presiding judge?
It's me.
Okay, I'm going to make you the host of the meeting, of the Zoom. The live stream is started. You are now the host, but don't start the round until I come back with the all clear. But I'm going to leave and go check the other rooms real quick.
So if I'm a host, does that mean I get a big button that says start?
Hi, y'all are good to go ahead and start the round.
What time is all loss?
It's 2.5 hours from now, so around like 12:55-ish. But y'all are good to go ahead and start it.
All right. Plaintiff's opening statement.
Your Honor, is it possible that we could attend to some pretrial matters?
All right, go ahead.
Well, good morning, Your Honor. My name is Ellen Napier, and along with my co-counsel Tyler Orndorff
Good morning, Your Honor.
and
Good morning.
Andrew Morales,
Good morning, Your Honor.
we represent the plaintiff, the estate of Genesis Petrillo, in today's trial. Now, Your Honor, further, we would like to tender some documents to the bench. These include the Midlands Rules of Evidence, relevant case law, the complaint, the answer, as well as the stipulations of the case, as well as the September 29th pretrial order granting the defendant motion for summary judgment on the first cause of action and denying that motion on summary judgment on the second. And as such, evidence going towards the charge of negligence per se is inadmissible in today's trial. Further, we'd also like to submit that exhibits 1 through 10 have been pre-admitted into evidence as per stipulation 3, and both parties have further stipulated that all pre-admitted evidence can be used in opening statements by either party.
Okay, the stipulations are obviously approved, so what is it you need a ruling on?
Your Honor, we're just getting this out at the beginning of the trial, as well as to ask your preferences further on some other matters.
Just present any undecided matter that you want me to rule on, and so we can get to the opening statements, okay?
Yes, Your Honor. So we'd like to ask Your Honor's preference on asking permission to present witnesses with evidence.
Are you talking about written evidence supporting the witness's statement? I don't have access to them right at this minute.
Okay. Well, Your Honor, when we present the witnesses with exhibits for the case, what would be your preference on asking permission to do so?
It's not necessary to ask permission if the written evidence that you're producing, if they're just testifying to its contents, then let them testify.
Yes, Your Honor. Two last things to note. We would like to invoke Rule 615, the constructive sequestration of all non-party witnesses.
That's granted.
And may we assume, as per Rule 603, that all witnesses have been pre-sworn?
Yes.
With that, Your Honor, the plaintiff is ready to proceed.
Thank you. Proceed.
Your Honor, is it okay if the defense makes appearances as well?
Appearances, yes, that's correct.
Okay. Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Iman Ahmed, and I'm joined by my co-counsel, Carson Dimbrawa.
Good morning, Your Honor.
And
Good morning.
David Lawless.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Good morning.
And together, we are representing the defendant, Harper Martini, in today's case. And with that, the defense is ready to proceed.
All right. As may be evident, this is my first time to be a judge in this proceeding, so you'll just have to tolerate with me as we go along. I'll do the best I can. Let's start.
Yes, Your Honor, may I proceed with the opening statement?
Please.
Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury, may it please the court. We find ourselves here today because the defendant, Harper Martini, went a step too far. The daughter of the defendant, Casey Soto, and her fiance, Genesis Petrillo, were soulmates. They'd been friends, fallen for each other, and when they decided to get married, they couldn't have been happier. The defendant was fit to be tied. She couldn't stand it, and she couldn't stand Genesis. All along the way, the defendant did what she could to complicate the wedding, to stop it, to get Genesis to leave, pushing every button she could, changing the venue, making changes without even asking the couple. But Genesis held on to Casey. He held on to love. Finally, on the night before the wedding at the rehearsal dinner, the defendant had had enough. She gifted Genesis a poison bottle of Cara wine, knowing that it would make Genesis very ill. Hoping to do away with the wedding once and for all, the defendant went a step too far. Genesis drank that wine, members of the jury, and the very next morning, Genesis was pronounced dead at 9:27 from complications caused by organophosphate poisoning. Members of the jury, we stand before you today bearing the burden of proof. We must only prove to you by a preponderance of the evidence that more likely than not, the defendant, Harper Martini, acted with the intent to cause harm to Genesis Petrillo, and that as a result of her actions, Genesis was harmed. Today, we will bring before you 3 witnesses. You will hear from Angel Rodriguez, a close friend of both Casey and Genesis over many years. He'll be able to tell you just how often the defendant and the victim disagreed. The evidence will show Genesis' progressively worsening condition throughout the night after he drank the defendant's gift wine. We expect to hear about how Genesis was rushed to the hospital. You'll hear about Angel's interaction with the defendant and how the defendant knew that it was Genesis who had gone to the hospital before Angel told her. Finally, he'll tell you about the heartbreaking moment he shared with Casey when she found out that Genesis had passed on the morning of their wedding. You'll hear next from Dr. Jimin Kwan, members of the jury, the physician who treated Genesis at the hospital. He'll tell you about just how closely the symptoms that wreaked havoc on Genesis' body followed the pattern of organophosphate poisoning. We expect to hear how the wine found in Genesis' stomach contained that very same chemical, and so did his blood. The evidence will show you that his body's reaction to the pesticides was a textbook case and pushed his nervous system just a step too far. Finally, you'll hear from Sam Arnold, the caterer for the wedding. Miss Arnold will tell you about the tension she observed in the wedding proceedings. We expect to hear how Miss Arnold saw pesticides in the very kitchen where the Cara bottle was being prepared on the very same day that Genesis drank it. The evidence will show that Harper Martini, the defendant, intended for Genesis alone to drink that wine. Now, members of the jury, at the end of trial today, after you've heard all the facts, after the evidence is laid out in front of you, my co-counsel Tyler Orndorff will stand before you again. He will ask you, as I am asking you now, to find the defendant, Harper Martini, liable for the intentional battery of Genesis Petrillo for taking their feud a step too far. Thank you.
Defense?
Yes, Your Honor. Mistakes, not murder. We as imperfect individuals make mistakes on a day-to-day basis, both small and large, irrelevant, and life-changing. Sometimes we leave the overhead lights on in our car overnight. Sometimes we mishandle raw chicken. And sometimes we take the easy route to resolving an issue. Whether the consequences of these mistakes are small or large, these mistakes fail to show intentional outcomes. What is rarely found in an individual is a mistake-free life. Some of us have mistakes that haunt us for the rest of our lives. Making mistakes may cause one to lose a soulmate, a friend, a job, or a precious item. These mistakes shape us into who we are here and now. Let me tell you about Harper Martini, the woman who is central to the case today. Harper was a world traveler, but a California native at heart. On one of the many vacations taken by Harper, she found her other half. The eager couple couldn't wait to start their lives together, and here's where we introduce Casey Soto. Casey was the apple of Harper's eye, whom Harper raised alone due to the unexpected passing of Harper's partner and Casey's father. Casey, an only child from a single-parent household, instantly bonded and relied on Harper. Harper was the only constant Casey ever knew. Harper, who adored Casey and supported all of Casey's endeavors, watched her grow up and take on new adventures. However, it's hard for any parent, let alone a single parent of an only child, to watch their one constant find love and leave the nest. Harper, like any parent, had opinions and expectations of who Casey should be with in the long run. Casey met Genesis, and the couple quickly hit it off. The happy couple soon got engaged, and Harper was not pleased. Genesis made a poor first impression on Harper by insulting her prized possession, the winery, Peony Estates. The two had a rocky relationship from the start and never failed to make that known with the cruel exchange of words they frequently had. Alcohol played a vital role in today's case, and the relationship between Harper and Genesis. We are here to discuss a winery owner, a heavy drinker, and a bottle of wine. Peony Estates, Harper's pride, joy, and winery, was purchased near a swamp. Was it the most ideal location for Midland's best-ranked winery? No. But it's what Harper, a young entrepreneur, could afford and make beautiful at the time of purchase. The defense is not intending to show the jury Harper Martini as a person who never makes mistakes. In fact, we are here to show you that Harper was an incredibly loving parent to Casey Soto, but not an incredible business owner. Harper made some incredible mistakes regarding the way she ran her business. And real-life mistakes will be discussed today, and these mistakes alone are not what make an individual liable of battery. Just because Harper didn't like Genesis does not mean Harper was intentionally responsible for the death of Genesis Petrillo. In a court of law, we must focus on the facts. And there are a lot of gray areas in today's case, and the plaintiff has the responsibility of making those gray areas black and white. But in order to prove battery, they must reveal intent from Harper and that the harm caused by her was specifically intended to be ingested by the Cara wine bottle. We, the defense, do not have a burden to prove. However, we do have the facts. Harper was the owner of Peony Estates, the venue where the wedding was supposed to be held. Harper was the mother of the bride and presented a bottle of wine to her soon-to-be son-in-law. This wine was named Cara by Casey Soto. This wine was presented as a gift to Genesis and appeared to serve as an olive branch to many of the guests attending the rehearsal dinner. Harper adored Casey and would do anything for her. Harper, who drank the wine to test it, presented this bottle to Genesis and was even comfortable enough presenting it to Genesis with Harper's only child at that same table. If Harper knew the wine was poisoned by pesticides, why would Harper risk putting the wine anywhere near her daughter? Harper also tasted the wine and then bottled it, yet Harper Martini is sitting here perfectly healthy today. Even after the trial today, many questions will be unanswered. What makes Harper the only suspect despite having numerous caterers and employees there? Could someone else have been involved? Was it without a doubt the wine that was toxic? How could a person who made one simple mistake lose everything and be found liable for battery? Members of the jury, I would like to prepare you for the possibility that you feel pressure to make a decision early. This case has many twists and turns, so hear both sides before you decide. Many of the witnesses in court today will be emotionally linked to the case, but I ask you to keep referring to the facts and elements of the battery charge. While mistakes happen frequently in our lives that go unnoticed for many years, we must consider the timeliness of understanding a big mistake made today so we do not falsely convict an individual of battery. We must rely on the facts in the case today and not the emotionally charged biases. There are way too many other possibilities and theories that could have caused the death of Genesis Petrillo. And with this, we, the defense, ask you to find Harper Martini not liable for battery against Genesis Petrillo.
Plaintiff ready to begin with her first witness?
Yes, Your Honor. The plaintiff would like to call Angel Rodriguez to the stand.
We've established he's been pre-sworn, right? All witnesses.
Yes, Your Honor.
Proceed.
Mr. Rodriguez, could you please introduce yourself to the court?
Yes. Good morning, Mike. Good morning, guys. My name is Angel Rodriguez. I'm an elementary school teacher here at Rapid River Valley Elementary School, as well as I am best friends with Genesis Petrillo.
And why are you here today?
Well, I'm here today to tell the events leading up to Genesis' wedding, as well as the events directly before Genesis' untimely death.
I want to start from the beginning then. How did you meet Genesis?
Well, I met Genesis back in 2016 when my friend Drew took me to a trivia night. I met Genesis with the trivia team, and him and I became fast friends. The only issue is though that Genesis was not really good at trivia. I mean, he couldn't even answer what the capital of Midlands was.
And did you know Casey Soto?
Yes, Casey was also part of the trivia team. She is Genesis' fiance, and I mean, she was the lifeline of the whole trivia team. She knew every single answer that was ever asked.
And do you know the defendant, Harper Martini?
Yes, of course I do. Harper Martini is Casey's mom, and she's also the owner of Peonia Estates, the wedding venue that was going to host Genesis' and Casey's wedding.
I want to talk about the wedding a bit. Were you a part of the wedding planning?
No, not at all. I tried to stay far away from that because it was just a little bit too toxic for me.
What was so toxic about it?
Well, I mean, I'm an elementary school teacher, so I deal with kids fighting all day long. But the fighting between Genesis and Harper was next level type of fighting. They were just kids going at it 24/7.
What would they fight about?
Everything. I mean, Harper would go off and say some mean comment about Genesis, and then Genesis would get hurt and try to stand up for himself, but that would just lead to more arguing.
Right. Now, when exactly did Genesis Petrillo die?
Genesis passed away on what was supposed to be his wedding day, which is June 8th, 2019, or the day after the wedding rehearsal dinner.
Now, I want to talk about the wedding rehearsal dinner. Were Genesis and Harper fighting that day too?
Of course they are. They're always fighting.
What were they fighting about this time?
I mean, this time was worse than every time else. They were fighting over pointless things like the napkins, the valves, even the lighting. I mean, at one point, I heard Harper tell Genesis that Genesis should just leave and save the family the headache, or else that Harper will make him disappear.
Objection, Your Honor. Narrative.
Granted.
Now, do you remember any specific statements that Harper Martini made to Genesis Petrillo?
Yes. While they were arguing, Harper said that Genesis should just leave and save the family the headache, or else Harper will make her disappear.
All right. How did you feel about that?
I mean, that's taken it a step too far, in my opinion.
All right. Well, how did the wedding rehearsal itself go?
Well, I mean, once Genesis and Harper got split up, the wedding rehearsal went fine. I mean, in fact, by the end of it, Harper even gifted everyone a bottle of Horizon wine. Everyone except for Genesis, who Harper actually gifted a bottle of Caro wine, something I'd never seen before.
Would you recognize this bottle of Caro wine if I showed it to you today?
Yes, I would.
Your Honor, permission to share with the court Exhibit 2A and 2B. It has already been tendered into evidence as per the stipulations.
Granted, go ahead. It's accepted.
Now, Mr. Rodriguez, what is this right here?
That is the bottle of Caro wine that Harper gave Genesis.
And what's 2B?
2B is the label of the wine.
Did Genesis drink from this bottle?
Yes, I saw Genesis have several glasses of wine, actually.
All right. And did you have any drinks from this bottle?
Genesis offered me a sip, but I spit it out right away because it didn't taste that good to me.
Now, after having several glasses of this bottle, how was Genesis behaving?
I mean, I've been with Genesis for years now when we've been drinking buddies, but after drinking several glasses of wine, Genesis started acting like I'd never seen him before. He started showing some very weird symptoms.
Objection, Your Honor. Narrative.
Sustain.
What was weird about his symptoms?
Well, first off, he started vomiting and sweating profusely. His skin looked all flushed, and when I tried to give him some water, he just vomited it all out.
Did you try to help Genesis?
Yes, I did. I actually called 911 and went to the hospital with him.
All right. And did you try to tell anyone else?
No, I did not. I just thought everything would pass over and that Genesis would be fine by tomorrow morning.
And did it pass over?
No, things actually got worse for Genesis, and Genesis went into a coma. From there, I rushed back to Peonia Estates to tell everyone.
And who did you tell first?
Well, I was going to go tell Casey the issues, but right when I walked through the door, Harper came to me, and Harper said, Genesis got poisoned? Oh no, we'll have to cancel the wedding. Only issue is I didn't tell anyone that Genesis was even in the hospital.
Objection, Your Honor, narrative.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Go ahead.
Your Honor, the witness is simply answering the question. While the answer may be slightly longer than opposing counsel would like, he's still answering the question.
No objection sustained. No narrative.
Mr. Rodriguez, what exactly did the defendant say to you about Genesis' condition?
Yes, Harper came up to me first and said, Genesis got poisoned? Oh no, we'll have to cancel the wedding.
Did you even tell the defendant about this?
No, I hadn't told anyone about it.
Mr. Rodriguez, do you believe that the defendant had something to do with Genesis' death?
Yes, due to that statement and the bottle of pesticides that I saw him holding, I believe that he was the cause of Genesis' death.
What bottle of pesticides are you talking about?
Well, the previous night at the rehearsal dinner, I saw Harper holding a bottle of pesticides. I asked him about it, and he said it was to kill Genesis because Genesis is such a pest.
Objection, Your Honor, hearsay.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Go ahead.
Your Honor, as per Rule 804 D2A, this is a statement of a party opponent, and as such is not hearsay.
Your Honor, may I respond?
All right, go ahead.
I believe that Mr. Rodriguez stated that I asked, which would there be hearsay. According to America's Best Cookie versus International House of Waffle, any out-of-court statement is considered hearsay.
May I respond to that, Your Honor?
Yes.
Questions, Your Honor, have no inherent truth value to them, and as such are not hearsay.
All right, objection overruled. Go ahead.
Yes, Your Honor.
Right. What bottle of pesticides were you talking about, Mr. Rodriguez?
Yes, the bottle of pesticides that Harper Martini was carrying around.
All right, and what did Mr. Martini say about this?
He said it was to kill Genesis because Genesis is such a pest.
Now, were you there when Genesis Petrillo died?
Yes, I was.
Can you tell us about that?
It was the most heartbreaking thing in the world. Genesis was such a great friend to me. I was there with his fiancee, Casey. It's just too heartbreaking for me.
Thank you, Your Honor. At this time, I have no further questions.
Okay, good morning, Mr. Rodriguez. Can you hear me? It says my internet connection is slow.
Yes, I can hear you.
Just making sure. Okay, so on May 11th of 2019, you and several wedding party members partied together at Black Bear Hotel and Casino, correct?
Yes, we did. This was our last hurrah party before the wedding.
And at that venue, you saw Casey walk away from Genesis visibly upset. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, we had all been drinking and they got into an argument about something.
And you concluded that there was a tough exchange causing Casey to walk away. Is this true?
Objection, Your Honor. Speculation to the mindset of Casey Soto and Genesis Petrillo.
Overruled.
Oh,
Can you ask again, please?
yes. You attended the rehearsal dinner of Casey Soto and Genesis Petrillo, right?
Yes, I did.
And at that rehearsal dinner, you saw Harper walk into the kitchen holding a pesticide canister. Is this correct?
Yes, I did.
And Harper walked into the kitchen with the canister because of a cockroach report. Is this true?
Yeah, like I said, I asked him about it, and he said it was to kill pests like Genesis. Apparently, that was supposed to be a joke, which was very foul-witted. But then, yeah, he did say it was for a cockroach. I didn't really think it was a good joke, though.
Okay. At the rehearsal dinner, you sat next to Genesis Petrillo, correct?
Yeah, I actually sat next to him all night.
And Casey Soto also sat at this table, right?
Yes.
You don't recall much of what was happening during the speeches, is that right?
No, not really.
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry, it's cutting out.
Oh, sorry. I said no, not really.
Okay. Did you see Harper's toast?
Yes, I did. I was there.
And you saw Harper give a special wine to Genesis as a gift. Is this accurate?
Yes, like I said, Harper gifted
And did
everyone.
you drink any of the wine that was gifted to Genesis from Harper?
Your Honor, my witness never finished answering the question.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. It's cutting out. You may
You're
finish.
good.
Oh, that's fine.
No, let's get the testimony correct. So ask again, let him finish his answer, then let's back up, okay?
Let me check make sure I'm on the correct Wi-Fi for one moment because it's very choppy.
I would ask the timekeeper stop the time at this time. I don't want to take that away from them. Oh, there we go. You're back.
If we've got a serious technical difficulty on the defense, then somebody speak up and let's make sure it's corrected if there's a problem.
Can you everybody hear me? It's frozen on my end at least.
I can
Yes,
hear
we
you,
can hear
yes.
Okay, I'm gonna stop my video if that's okay and just see if that helps at all.
No objection.
That's fine, go ahead.
Okay. Did you see Harper's toast?
Yes, I did. Are you there?
Yes, sorry. Here, there we go.
That's fine.
It kind of, and you saw Harper give a special wine to Genesis as a gift. Is this accurate?
Yes. Like I was trying to say, Harper actually gifted everyone a bottle of wine, that being Horizon. The only difference, though, was that Harper did give Genesis a bottle of Cara wine.
And did you drink any of the wine that was gifted to Genesis from Harper?
Genesis did offer me a glass, and I did take a sip from it, but I immediately spat it out because it did not taste good to me whatsoever.
And Genesis is someone you have frequently consumed alcohol with, right?
Objection, Your Honor. Actually, never mind.
Yes, him and I have been drinking buddies for a long time, and like I've said, we can go pretty hard.
And from the bar, you took tequila shots ordered by Genesis at around midnight, right?
Yes, I did, but I don't actually know if Genesis ever drank those shots.
After drinking with Genesis this night, you noticed that Genesis seemed to lack coordination and have slurred speech. Is this right?
Yes, after he had several glasses of
And
the
Genesis
Cara
began
wine.
to throw up. Oh, sorry, I apologize. And
Y'all
Genesis
are
began to throw up
excuse me,
later after
just a
consuming
minute. Hold on a second. Y'all are
I'm
talking
sorry,
on top of
I'm-
each other.
Oh, goodness. Okay.
Let the witness finish his statement and then pick up, okay?
Yes, Your Honor. I'm sorry. I'm still having some technical difficulties. Go ahead, please proceed.
Yes, like I said, I saw this lack of coordination, all this stuff after him drinking the several glasses of the Cara wine.
Okay, and Genesis began to throw up after consuming several glasses of wine. Is this accurate?
Yes, it is, but that was only several. I've seen him drink so much more before.
And at 8 a.m., after the staying up all night at the hospital, you may still have been drunk. Is this true?
Yeah, I was. I was actually going pretty hard at the wedding because, it was my time away from the kids.
No further questions at this time, Your Honor.
Plaintiff, redirect.
No, Your Honor. We asked that the witness be allowed to step down.
Is the
Thank you,
witness,
guys.
is the witness excused or is he subject to recall?
He's not subject to recall, Your Honor. The witness is excused.
All right, proceed. Plaintiff's next witness.
Your Honor, at this time, we'd like to call Dr. Jimin Kwan to the stand.
So. Okay, proceed.
Please state your name for the court.
Yes, my name is Dr. Jimin Kwan.
And what is your current profession, Dr. Kwon?
I am the Chief Emergency Room Physician for the Midlands River Valley Hospital.
And Dr. Kwon, could you tell us a bit about your education?
Of course. I actually graduated with a bachelor's in sciences in biology with a minor in chemistry from the Georgia Institute of Technology. From there, I went on to receive my medical doctorate from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. I later completed my residency at Emory University Hospital, specifically their Department of Emergency Medicine, and I stayed there to complete a medical fellowship in toxicology.
And Dr. Kwon, why are you here with us today?
I'm here because I was actually the attending physician and Genesis Petrio's treating physician at the time of his death. I was also asked by both parties to present my conclusions about how exactly Genesis Petrio's death was caused.
And Dr. Kwon, in your conclusions today, are they based on sufficient facts and data?
Yes, actually. For my conclusion today, I reviewed exhibits 5, 6, 7, 10, and 23, which are the reports I ordered, the death certificate of Genesis Petrio, a test on a bottle of Cara wine, and an alcohol impairment chart, respectively. I have also used the affidavit of Angel Rodriguez, as well as my experience with Mr. Petrio in the hospital in order to come to my conclusions.
And Dr. Kwon, what methods and principles did you use to come to your conclusions in your report?
I have used methods of testing, diagnosis, and observation that not only I have learned while completing my medical degree, but I've also used many times during my residency and fellowship in toxicology, as well as methods and application that I use every day at the hospital in order to treat patients.
Well, Dr. Kwon, tell us about when you first encountered Genesis Petrio.
Of course. I first encountered Mr. Petrio when he was brought into the ER by the EMTs. Their friend, Angel Rodriguez, informed me that Mr. Petrio had been suffering from nausea and vomiting. Petrio was also showing symptoms of stomach cramps, chest pain, slurred speech, and they smelled strongly of wine. I admitted Mr. Petrio to the hospital as an alcohol poisoning case originally.
Well, Dr. Kwon, after that, can you tell us about your examination of Petrio initially?
Of course. When I admitted Mr. Petrio, I took vitals and did a full systems examination. It was then where I noticed that there was something not quite right. There was a variety of symptoms, muscle twitching, difficulty breathing, the inability to self-ambulate, excessive tearing, that did not align with alcohol poisoning, and I believe that Mr. Petrio may have ingested something toxic.
Well, Dr. Kwon, what specifically made you suspect that?
Well, as I said, there were a few symptoms that didn't align. There were contracted pupils, excessive tearing, muscle twitching, incontinence, and the inability to self-ambulate, as well as Mr. Petrillo had a very slow pulse. I'm sorry. Alcohol poisoning usually causes a weak but rapid pulse, so these symptoms were contrary to one another.
And Dr. Kwon, all these symptoms, what conclusion did you draw from them?
I concluded that, based on things that I have learned in my fellowship in toxicology and things I treat at the hospital all the time, that Genesis Petrillo had organophosphate-based poisoning.
And Dr. Kwon, what can you tell us about organophosphate poisoning?
Organophosphate poison is extremely deadly. It works very fast in the human body, and depending on how it's contracted, it causes initial symptoms at the site of the vector site. In this case, we saw incontinence, stomach cramps, nausea, vomiting, but then it quickly moves to the nervous system where we see Genesis Petrillo's symptoms of muscle twitching and bronchospasms.
And how could Genesis have been poisoned this way?
Well, there are actually 3 ways someone can be poisoned by organophosphates. There's ingestion, inhalation, and contact poisoning. Given Mr. Petrillo's symptoms and that the fact that I saw no sign of the other 2 ways of contracting the poison, I determined ingestion to be the way that Mr. Petrillo got the poisoning.
So proceeding with that conclusion, what did you do?
I immediately ordered a poisons and toxins analysis.
And would you recognize this if I showed it to you here today?
I would.
Your Honor, at this time, I would like to present the witness with what has been previously marked as Exhibit 5, as well as pre-admitted as per Stipulation 3.
Proceed.
Now, Dr. Kwan, what is this that is displayed for you?
This is the toxicology report that I ordered.
And what can you tell us about this test?
Well, what's important to note is that there are extremely low levels of acetylcholinesterase in Mr. Petrillo's blood. It's important to note that organophosphate can actually not be detected by a test in blood. So instead, we test for the enzyme acetylcholinesterase. It is a naturally occurring enzyme in the body, and its lowering levels are very closely tied actually to organophosphate poisoning. So these low levels of acetylcholinesterase confirmed my suspicion that Mr. Petrillo had organophosphate poisoning.
I see. And did the other tests you ran confirm your suspicions as well?
Yes, the other test I ran, the specific poisons and toxins analysis, showed both blood and stomach samples come back positive for organophosphate pesticide.
And would you recognize this test if I showed it to you here in court today?
I would.
At this time, Your Honor, I would like to present the witness with Exhibit 6, and this again has been pre-admitted as per the stipulations.
All right, proceed.
All right. Dr. Kwan, what is this that has been displayed on your screen?
This is the specific poisons and toxins analysis that I had ordered.
And what can you tell us about this report?
Well, as I said before, it is very important to notice that both Petrillo's blood and stomach contents were tested, and both tested positive for isofenfos, which is a type of organophosphate pesticide.
And with that said, what can you conclude about this test, Dr. Kwan?
Well, with this, I could conclude significantly that there was organophosphate pesticide in Mr. Petrillo's symptoms. It's also important to note here that Mr. Petrillo's stomach contents were also tested, and only the liquid, what appeared to be wine, tested positive. Anything that appeared to be solid food was also tested in negative. This led me to believe that the wine itself is what contained this poison.
Okay. And was there anything else to suggest that the wine might have contained poison?
Yes, I believe there was a test conducted on the bottle that the wine came in.
Okay. And would you recognize that test here in court today, Dr. Kwan, if I showed it to you?
I would.
Your Honor, at this time, I'd like to present the witness with what has been previously marked as Exhibit 10. As per the stipulations, this has been pre-admitted.
All right, go ahead.
Now, Dr. Kwan, what can you tell us about the test performed on the bottle?
This is a test that was run in order to determine the concentration of many different chemicals inside the empty, I think, Cara wine bottle, I believe it was.
And what can you conclude about this test on Cara bottle?
Well, this test was given specifically for different types of pesticides. And as you can see in the case, not only is there a high amount of the pesticide isofenfos, but this asterisk here does mean that it exceeds the FDA maximum allowed levels. It's also very important to note that the tested result concentration of 91 micrograms per liter is more than enough to kill a human being. It's outright insane.
Now, Dr. Kwan, you said this was a wine bottle?
Yes.
Did alcohol have anything to do with Mr. Petrillo's symptoms?
Well, alcohol might have exacerbated the symptoms of organophosphate poisoning, and I will admit that Mr. Petrillo was a little bit intoxicated when I examined him. I do not believe that it had anything to do with causing the symptoms that I saw.
Now, moving forward, when you concluded that Mr. Petrillo had been poisoned, what actions did you take?
After concluding that Mr. Petrillo had possibly ingested an organophosphate pesticide, I quickly began treatment for organophosphate poisoning because if I was correct in my diagnosis, Mr. Petrillo was very close to death.
And what happened after you began treatment, Dr. Kwan?
Well, As I said before, organophosphate pesticide works in steps, and unfortunately, this was just a step too far. After a few minutes, I began treatments. Mr. Petrillo fell into a coughing fit. He had a seizure and eventually fell into a coma. Mr. Petrillo actually never regained consciousness, and despite our best efforts, actually passed away. I had to call the time of death myself, and I signed the death certificate at 09:27 on July 8th, 2019.
And what can you conclude briefly, Dr. Kwan, in Mr. Petrillo's case?
I can say with a reasonable degree of scientific medical certainty that the cause of death of Mr. Genesis Petrillo was poisoning by an organophosphate pesticide.
And Dr. Kwan, what was the source of that pesticide?
Again, I can conclude with a reasonable degree of medical certainty that the source was this wine bottle that was tested.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions. I tender this witness for cross-examination.
Defense,
May I proceed, Your Honor?
please.
Dr. Kwan, going into your experience, you are the board of directors of Doctors for Organic Solutions, right?
Yes, I am actually.
And it's your belief that chemical pesticides are a scourge to the environment.
Yes, they can hurt crops actually, and as we see here today, humans as well.
And doctor, your organization is actively fighting for the outright ban of chemical pesticides. Is that correct?
Yes.
In fact, you are hoping that the results of this case specifically are used to convince lawmakers to ban pesticides. Is that right?
That would be a positive, but I assure you, no outside sources cause any sorts of discrepancy in my testimony here today. I took an oath when I became a medical practitioner that I would testify and conduct my diagnosis with no amount of bias.
Thank you, Dr. Kwan. Let's move into your diagnosis. You first interacted with Genesis Petrillo at the hospital. Is that right?
I did, yes.
And they came in as a patient, right?
Yes.
Let's go over some of the symptoms and factors Petrillo experienced. Petrillo had trouble responding to you. Is that right?
Yes, this was likely due to some sort of intoxication.
They smelled of alcohol.
Yes.
And Petrillo even stated that they had been drinking an exorbitant amount of alcohol, right?
Well, not specifically Petrillo. They couldn't respond to me, but it was said by their friend, Angel Rodriguez.
They also had nausea, right?
Yes, severely.
Vomiting.
Oh, yes.
And severe slurred speech.
Extremely.
And all of these were indicative of alcohol poisoning, right?
Yes, originally.
Now, you eventually did not find Petrillo to be suffering from alcohol poisoning. Is that correct?
This is correct, yes.
You noticed a very specific symptom, that being a bronchospasm, right?
Yes, bronchospasms are not a symptom of alcohol poisoning at all.
So you believe that there was a different substance that was ingested instead?
Yes.
And you believe that to be organophosphates, is that right?
Yes, it is the most commonly used type of pesticide in Midlands, and I recognize this case due to the bronchospasms as a sort of pesticide poisoning.
Now, I'm hoping to clarify a few things here, Doctor. Organophosphates cannot be directly tested for, right?
That is correct, yes.
Meaning you have to order very specific and direct tests in order to look for organophosphates.
Yes, as I said before, we have to order a test for the enzyme acetylcholinesterase.
And these tests are not the normal battery of tests that you would order for a patient, right?
Not necessarily. I mean, I don't see a patient with organophosphate pesticide poisoning every day.
Now, you can agree with me that there are three ways that an individual can ingest or come into contact with organophosphate poison, right?
Yes, I can.
The first one is by contact, yes?
Yes.
Now, skin contact enough is at least will cause severe burning and poisoning. Is that right?
Yes, directly with the pesticide at high concentrations.
And you didn't notice any burning on Genesis Petrio's skin, right?
Yes, because this turns out the pesticide was mixed into a wine. If the wine had gotten,
you also go ahead.
If the wine had gotten on their skin, it most likely would not have caused burning due to the low concentration.
And the second method you mentioned was breathing it in. Is that right?
Yes, in a type of aerosol.
But you didn't notice anything in their lungs or on their breathing cavities in order to suggest that they breathed it in, right?
No.
And so that led you to conclude that they might have eaten or drank this poison. Is that right?
Yes. Ingestion.
Yeah, so it's your opinion that Genesis ingested that pesticide.
Yes.
Now, you tested the contents of Genesis's stomach. Is that right?
Yes, I did. I did not conduct the test myself, but I did order one.
Now, you cannot be certain that it was the wine specifically in Genesis's stomach that contained the poison, can you?
There is a probability of the contaminant being something else, but given that the fact that any other foods that were tested in the stomach returned negative, it is a high probability that the contaminant was the wine itself.
Dr. Kwan, did you check every single particle of food in the stomach?
I am not aware of the amount of particles of foods the laboratory technicians tested.
Just to clarify, you did not conduct this test yourself, right?
No, I am not certified to conduct laboratory tests.
So you were unaware of actually what was specifically tested when they ran that test?
No, but I trust the laboratory technicians to confirm full and complete tests as they do this every day.
So let's take a look at your perspective and your understanding of how food mixes in the stomach. If another substance was introduced to the stomach, could those contents mix and therefore come up as a false positive?
That could be the case, yes, but it would have to, in my opinion, have mixed very easily with the wine. So it would have to have been another liquid of some sort.
Dr. Kwan, Genesis Petrio's stomach contents were tested long after they had ingested food and wine. Is that right?
Yes, this is true.
So there was a long period of time for that food to settle, mix, and digest, yes?
Generally,
Objection, Your Honor,
although...
compound question.
Sorry. I've overruled.
Do you need me to re-ask the question, Dr. Kwan?
Yes, please.
So there was a long period of time that would allow for the food to be ingested, combine, and digest, yes?
Yes, although generally the human stomach takes around 12 to 13 hours to completely digest food. So the time window is there a little bit with what you're saying, but not quite.
Let me be a little bit more clear, Dr. Kwan. If any other food was ingested, that would have combined with the wine in the stomach, yes?
It is a possibility, yes, but it's very low.
And that would make the uncontaminated wine appear to be contaminated, would it not?
It would, but as I said, it's a very low chance, but it might be the case.
Is that a yes to my question, Dr. Kwan?
Yes, but the chances are very low.
Now, you also reviewed the affidavit of Angel Rodriguez, is that correct?
I did, yes.
And in this affidavit, you noticed that Angel had also taken a sip of the wine, yes?
Yes, they did, although they immediately spit it out.
And you also noticed Angel Rodriguez at the hospital, is that right?
I did, yes.
And Angel Rodriguez did not have any burning on their mouth, did they?
No.
Objection, Your Honor, lack of personal knowledge. There is no way that Dr. Kwan would have known about the inside of Angel's mouth. He's not a patient. He was just there bringing Genesis to the hospital.
Your Honor, I can...
Lay your foundation to his to address that issue. I thought I heard him say he was present, but Layla, I'll sustain the objection subject to you laying a predicate to get his testimony in.
Yes, Your Honor. Dr. Kwan, you saw Angel Rodriguez at the hospital.
I did, yes. Angel Rodriguez came in with Mr. Genesis Petrillo.
And you interacted with Angel Rodriguez, is that right?
Yes, I did.
You heard Angel Rodriguez speak, yes?
Yes.
And at no time during those conversations did Angel have any trouble speaking?
I would not say so, no.
And there was no indication on the outside of their mouth or their lips that any burning had occurred, yes?
I wouldn't say that I was close enough to notice, but from a good distance, we have to stay 6 feet away at the hospital now, that this was not the case.
Dr. Kwan, this happened in 2019, is that correct?
Yes.
Did you still have to practice COVID-19 protocols in June of 2019?
Sorry, we've been practicing these protocols for so long, everything blends together. No, you're correct.
Thank you, Dr. Kwan. No further questions, Your Honor.
Redirect.
Your Honor, no, sir. We've just asked that the witness be dismissed. Excused.
Any objection to excusing the witness?
No, Your Honor.
Being no objection, witness excused. Any further plaintiff's witnesses?
Yes, Your Honor. We would like to call Sam Arnold to the stand.
Proceed.
Could you please state your name for the court?
My name is Sam Arnold.
And Ms. Arnold, what do you do for a living?
Well, since I was little, I always had a passion of creating food, art out of food. So I'm a maestro of culinary art.
Thank you, Ms. Arnold. Now, how did you get into the culinary business?
Well, after being honored to go to Le Cordon Bleu in Paris, I was honored to get the highly sought position as sous chef at Le Pique.
And since moving back to Midlands, what have you done for work?
Well, after Father's death, I felt like I needed to venture out on my own. So I did attempt to start my own cafe that ended up lasting only 6 months. And since then, I've been doing catering to make ends meet.
Thank you, Ms. Arnold. Now, moving on, are you familiar with the defendant, Harper Martini?
As I said, Harper Martini, I started catering to make ends meet, and Harper Martini ended up actually being one of my very first clients. We actually shared a first-year anniversary, and ever since that first catering event, we've been close business friends.
And what was your most recent project with Harper Martini?
Well, like I said, Harper and I have worked in a lot of events together. So when Harper asked me to cater her daughter's wedding, I was so honored.
And as the caterer, what events were you a part of?
I was responsible for the wedding rehearsal as well as the reception.
And when did you plan these events?
Well, I went in late November to discuss with Harper about the menu.
And what happened when you arrived?
Well, when I first walked in, I remember seeing Harper with a bag of pesticide. He had seen me and we walked into the kitchen where he then tossed it aside. I thought that was a very odd place to place a pesticide, and he only moved it until I brought it up.
Thank you. Now, moving on, what can you tell us about the day of the wedding rehearsal?
Well, I got there promptly at 11 a.m. I like to make sure I'm not too early or not too late. And I saw Harper preparing many wine bottles as I entered the kitchen.
Now, you mentioned that there was pesticide in the kitchen earlier. Was there any pesticide in the kitchen that day?
Actually, now that you mention it, there was pesticide in the kitchen. right next to the bottles that Harper was preparing. She
And
didn't
did you
even
do
move it.
anything?
Oh, sorry.
Keep on going, Ms. Reynolds, sorry.
And she didn't even move it until I brought it up. She said, I asked them what they were doing there, and she said to deal with pests like Genesis.
Objection, Your Honor, to hearsay.
Sustain.
May I be heard, Your Honor?
Yes.
Your Honor, this statement is made by the party opponent, Harper Martini, therefore is it not considered hearsay.
All right. Objection denied. Proceed.
Now, Ms. Arnold, how did this comment make you feel?
Well, just from our conversation during the menu planning, it seems like Harper and Genesis have a lot of tension between them. So,
Your Honor, to speculation.
Sustain.
Now, moving on.
You have a half a minute.
Sorry. Now moving on, were these wine bottles, did you ever give out these wine bottles?
could you repeat the question?
Did you ever give out these wine bottles as gifts?
Yes, I did.
And were they the same for all the guests?
No. Majority of the guests had the same 2017 Horizon wine, but Genesis was only given the 2019 car line.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thumbs up.
Plaintiff, is that for this witness, or is the plaintiff got any further witnesses, or is they exhausted their time?
I believe the defense can cross Ms. Arnold.
All right, proceed.
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning, Mrs. Arnold. My name is Iman, and I'm just going to be asking you a couple follow-up questions.
Yeah.
So earlier you mentioned that you owned a food service business.
Yes, a catering business.
Okay, and so you've catered for a couple of events now.
Yes.
And so you were asked by Harper Martini if you could cater for Casey and Genesis's rehearsal dinner. Is that right?
Yeah.
And so because it was Harper who set this up, and you typically meet with your clients beforehand, you eventually met with Harper. Is that right?
That is correct.
And so you held a tasting event for Harper and a couple of others on February 8th. Does that sound familiar?
Yes, I worked along with Blair to ensure that this tasting event would go pretty smoothly.
Okay. And so while you were there on February 8th, you found that the kitchen at Peony Estates was pretty organized, pretty well organized. Is that right?
Yeah.
And so fast forward to May 13th, 2019, you called Harper.
That is correct.
And during this phone call, Harper played you a voicemail that Genesis left for Harper.
That is correct.
And based on this voicemail, it was clear to you that Genesis hated Harper. Is that right?
Well, Harper was intoxicated. I mean, Genesis was intoxicated at the moment, so I can't be too clear on his feelings.
But based on the tone of the voicemail.
Objection, Your Honor. Speculation.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Sure, go ahead.
So this is not speculation because it's based on the witness's rationally based perspective of listening to that voicemail.
No, let's sustain the objection.
Yes, Your Honor. So moving on to when you found out that Genesis had passed away, you immediately panicked, right?
I wouldn't say panicked, but I was concerned.
Well, when you found out, you immediately thought that it was your fault, that you were responsible for Genesis's death.
I would not say immediately.
Objection, Your Honor. Improper expert opinion. The witness is not an expert in this and cannot testify to this.
Overruled. She overruled. She can answer the question.
Yes, Your Honor. So just to re-ask my question, whenever you found out that Genesis passed away, you immediately thought that it was your fault.
I wouldn't say immediately, but yes, I was concerned about any contamination with the food.
Because you had thought that perhaps it was your food that might have killed Genesis.
Yes.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Redirect. Is there time given for
No,
redirect?
no redirect,
no
Your Honor.
time.
I just asked that my witness can step down.
Right. Witness is excused. Further witnesses from plaintiff?
None, Your Honor. We're ready to proceed to defense. But we do ask that perhaps based on all last time that we might be able to take a 5-minute break before we start.
Timekeeper, is that allowed?
Recess.
We have an hour and 32 minutes until all lost, so we do have enough time to take a 5-minute recess.
All right, we'll take a 5-minute recess. Give us a 1 minute warning, Mr. Timekeeper.
Oh, 1 minute warning. We were at the 12:28 mark for the 5 minute recess. So do we want to extend that to 12:30 or?
No, let's proceed.
Plan is ready to proceed.
All right, let's proceed.
Your Honor, the defense would like to call Danny Francazio to the stand.
All right.
Mr. Francazio, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, just clarifying. Please introduce yourself to the court.
My name is Danny Francazio.
What do you do for a living?
I own the premier wine establishment in Rapid River Valley. You should come pay me a visit, meet my two dogs, Rosie and Pedro, who my establishment is actually named after.
Where did you go to school?
I went to Boston College for my degree in biology, where I studied the science of fruit-based fermentation, and I got my MBA from Duke.
Are you aware of Harper Martini?
Yes, I took a risky business decision and took a chance on an inexperienced winemaker by hiring them.
What was your experience working with her?
Like I said, it was risky. They were definitely a project and working with them. However, I was able to train them. They moved up in my ranks at my establishment.
What did she do for you?
First, they were a cellar hand. They dealt with the transfer of wine and ensuring there was no pests in the cellar. And in case that there were pests, they would use pesticides very carefully. So I taught Harper everything they know about appropriate precautions with pesticides.
Why did she need to be careful with the pesticides?
Not only is it the law, common sense, and good business, it ensures that it does not contaminate the wine and poison those who consume it.
How did Harper go about this process?
Harper performed this treatment about 6 times. They would notify me, we'd seal off the barrels, use pesticides, and carefully store them away in the garage.
To your knowledge, did Harper continue to practice the same precautions at Peony Estates?
I have no idea. That Harper always so wrapped up in other things.
So you said that Harper moved up in the ranks at Rosie and Pedro. What did you mean by that?
In 2014, with openings available, I promoted them to manager and they exceeded my expectations for almost a year.
Did Harper bring a lot to the table during her time at Rosie and Pedro?
Absolutely. I have to compare him to the all-star Patriots quarterback Tom Brady. Harper always strived to increase Rosie and Pedro's profits.
Did you enjoy having Harper as an employee?
Of course, Harper was fundamental in making Rosie and Pedro a successful business, and I was proud to have Harper represent my prized winery.
Did she stay at Rosie and Pedro's?
Disappointingly, in 2015, they betrayed me and quit.
So you said that Harper betrayed you. What did you mean by that?
After everything I had done for her, she took the knowledge I gave her and started her own winery in my valley.
How did you react to Harper starting her own winery?
I was infuriated. I gave so many opportunities to Harper. After Harper announced the opening of Peony Estates, I banned her from ever stepping foot on my fruitful Rosie and Pedro soil.
How was Rosie and Pedro impacted by the opening of Peony Estates?
Well, we lost a significant amount of business. I took a severe pay cut to ensure my employees weren't going to be out of a job, though.
Were you aware of Harper's child?
Yes, she was a dear friend of mine and her fiance, Genesis. He visited my establishment quite often.
Did you know about the wedding?
Yes, the original plan was actually to host it at Rosie and Pedro's.
You said the original plan. Did the plans change?
Yes, the plans changed in 2018 when I received an invitation in the mail to their wedding at Peony Estates.
Did you plan on attending their wedding?
No, I respectfully declined. I would never want to jeopardize Casey's special day.
So what is the most recent event you're familiar with regarding the wedding of Casey Soto and Genesis Petrillo?
I'm aware that Genesis passed away the morning of the wedding. It was absolutely devastating, and I felt so bad for Casey and Harper. Rosie and Pedro's hasn't been the same since my 2 best customers have been absent.
No further questions at this time, Your Honor.
Ross?
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Francazio, you were aware of the strained relationship between Genesis and the defendant, Harper Martini, correct?
Yes, in-laws always have issues.
And Harper would often complain to you about Genesis.
Yeah, she would send me some voicemails or emails, and I never really wanted to talk with her in the first place.
Right. And you even witnessed Genesis and Harper shouting at each other at times.
I had always heard of their arguments, and it was well known that there was issues between them.
Now, one of these times included the argument you heard between Genesis and Harper in July of 2015.
Yes.
Now, during this argument, you heard the defendant say, "If you ever try to take my Casey away from me, it'll be the last thing you'll ever do."
Yes, I'm sure, and they'll say things like this all the time.
Now, you stated that the defendant Harper would often complain to you about Genesis through several voicemails, sorry.
Yes.
Objection, Your Honor, hearsay.
So
May I respond?
What's the question first? What's the question from the plaintiff's attorney?
The voicemails between Danny Francazio and Harper Martini.
Or whether they get them or the content of it?
Well, I just asked if he was familiar with the voicemails.
Have those emails been submitted and by agreement? Are they part of the record yet, or are you?
No, Your Honor, that's where I'm heading.
All right, then pick up with your last question was he familiar with them, correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, then after your next question, give the other side a chance to object before he answers.
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
Yes.
Would you recognize these voicemails if I showed them to you today?
Yes.
Permission to show Exhibit 18.
Exhibit 18?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, I show it.
Are you able to see the voicemails, Mr. Francazio?
One moment, let me grab my reading glasses. Yes.
Do you recognize these?
Let me interrupt you. Is this this is a transcription of whose conversations being transcribed?
The voicemail between that Harper Martini left the witness.
All right.
Do you recognize these documents?
Yes.
Is this a fair and accurate copy?
Yes.
Has it been altered or changed in any way?
No, not that I can tell.
Your Honor, I move to enter Exhibit 18 into evidence and publish it to the jury.
All right, now this is a conversation that he heard, and that this is a transcription, and he's verifying that this is what he heard.
Yes,
from
Your
Martini.
Honor. Yes.
All right, now any objection? I want to give you opportunity to object.
No objections, Your Honor.
All right, it's admitted.
Thank you. Now, in Exhibit 18C, the defendant says, maybe we can get Genesis to move away. A one-way ticket, you know?
Yes.
And now moving on in Exhibit 18D.
Your Honor, cumulative.
Sorry?
What's the cumulative?
No, I didn't rule that it was cumulative. So if we're moving to another exhibit and you have an objection, then I want you to get a chance to have your objection.
Your Honor, I'm objecting to reading verbatim.
Your Honor, I'm not reading verbatim.
If you're going to go through and ask, first off, the witness has the witness had a chance to review the exhibit? And I believe he said he had.
Yes, Your Honor.
Then I don't see the necessity of reading additional parts of it to him. If there's some portion of it that you want to direct his attention to and have a question about, fine. But other than that, I don't see the necessity of reading it out to the witness. If that's and so let's pick up with that admonition and to see what happens. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Proceed.
May I just ask one final question
Go ahead.
using this exhibit? Now, you read in this exhibit that the defendant, Harper Martini, said that Genesis is like a cellar pest, and that if they sold a Genesis pesticide, that I'd probably give them another $1 billion. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm sure I'd say the same thing if I had in-laws I didn't like.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Your
Any
Honor,
further direct?
no, Your Honor. I just asked that my witness is released from the stand at this time.
Okay, so are you on pause for the witness, or are you through with the witness?
No, Your Honor. I asked that he can step down from the stand, Your Honor.
All right. Assuming no objection, the witness excused.
Yes, Your Honor.
Your Honor.
Defense?
Your Honor, at this time, may the defense call the next witness.
Proceed.
The defense calls Austin Lewis to the stand. Good morning, Ms. Lewis. Could you please go ahead and introduce yourself to the court?
Good morning to all. My name is Austin Lewis.
What do you do for a living?
I make wine for a living. Most recently, I'm in charge of overseeing the growth, harvesting, fermentation, aging, and the bottling at Peony Estates.
So how long have you been a winemaker?
Oh, well, winemaking's in my blood. Back in the day, my mother was in charge of winemaking at what used to be called the Cumberland Farm Winery, but it's Rosie and Pedro's now. I took my job as a winemaker there in 2012, and I've been making wine ever since.
Have you ever worked anywhere else outside of where you just stated?
I've just worked at Rosie and Pedro's and then at Peony Estates.
Okay, and who did you meet at Peony Estates?
Well, that's where I met Harper Martini. We met actually right after I started my winemaking job there, and we really hit it off as friends.
Could you please describe your relationship with Harper Martini?
Well, Harper and I have been close friends for quite a while now. Back in 2015, he asked me to come on board as the head winemaker at his own winery, Peony Estates. Even offered me a stake in the business, and I jumped at the opportunity. It was an exciting endeavor, no doubt, but we did have a few problems along the way.
You mentioned problems. What kind of problems did you guys have?
Well, Peony Estates is located near a swamp. That was just the best that Harper could afford with what he'd saved up at the time to buy the winery. Now, the proximity meant that pests were a concern for the facility. Basically, if there was a pest out there—
Objection, Your Honor. As per the pretrial order from September 29th, any evidence that goes to suggest negligence per se or toward the negligence per se charge is inadmissible in trial here today.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Yeah, please.
The witness is simply describing the type of problems she had witnessed while working at Peony Estates.
All right, plaintiff, what was the ruling? Describe what was presented to the court and what was the ruling concerning that evidence to be that was denied or couldn't be offered.
Yes. So the ruling, pardon me, the dicta of the ruling was that no evidence going towards the charge of negligence per se was admissible in battery trial. And I believe that it is being proffered in this way by the defense.
The defense, you're saying you're offering it for what purpose?
We're just exploring alternate theories of what might have happened, and simply the witness is responding to their experience working at Peony Estates and the problems that they experienced.
All right, overruled. Go ahead.
Yes, Your Honor. Mrs. Lewis, could you, what kind of problems did you say that you witnessed there?
Oh, well, as I was saying, we were located near a swamp, which means that if there was any kind of bug out there that would like to eat a grape, you could be sure it would show up.
So how did you guys go about handling all of these problems?
Well, originally we were using organic solutions to try to contain any of these pest issues, but sticking to these organic solutions, it wasn't just costly, it was ineffective too. So then in October of 2015, we switched over to a chemical pesticide for our building foundations and for our vines. And then we started using chemical solutions inside the facilities in 2018 after an infestation.
Did you and Harper ever have any disagreements about the best way to handle these issues at Peony Estates?
Well, Harper is who initiated the switch to chemical pesticides for our vines and our building foundation. As far as spraying the foundations of the buildings, there was no disagreement. I didn't have any concerns about that. But using the chemical solutions directly on the vines absolutely did not sit right with me. Not
Objection,
only
Your Honor, narrative.
Your Honor, may I respond?
First off, the objection was that she was testifying in a narrative fashion. Okay, I'll sustain that. I want you to go back and I want you to be careful with questions because I perceive you getting close to the previous objection about the negligence per se aspects of it. So let's cautiously go through this now. And you ask your questions, give plaintiffs a chance to object if they need to. Go ahead.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Lewis, you mentioned something about the landscape. Could you describe the landscape with the grapes, please?
Of course. So when we purchased Peony Estates, it sat on a long slope, and it still does, but that wasn't a problem when we first started planting grapes. However, after we switched to the use of chemical pesticides, I was worried that it could cause some contamination issues with grapes down at the bottom of the flat.
Your Honor, I have to re-raise my objection under the pretrial order. This definitely goes to proving negligence per se rather than battery.
So I sustain your objection. Let's move on to the next set of questions.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Lewis, you mentioned that with the landscape and the grapes, you often had to work around this. So could you describe how often you threw out those grapes?
Of course. So we would rope off a section of the grapes at the bottom of the hill and throw them out with each harvest.
Okay, and are you aware of the investigation on Peony Estates?
Yes, I am.
And what are your thoughts on what?
I have to object. This line of questioning is still going in the direction of proving negligence per se rather than any prong of battery.
Your Honor, may I respond?
All right.
I simply just asked if this witness was aware of the investigation at Peony Estates. Ms. Lewis did work there, so I'm simply just asking if she's aware of the investigation.
Your Honor, may I respond to that?
All right.
So this was an FDA health inspection going to the safety standards of Peony Estates, and therefore does not have to do with the battery trial that we're dealing with here today, where the plaintiff is Harper Martini, not Peony Estates, the winery. Oh, sorry, the defense representative.
Right. Does any of the testimony about the investigation by the FDA have any time and the batches thrown out? Has there been any time reference to the particular grapes that were bottled and that are subject of this lawsuit? Or does anybody know? So is the only thing we're establishing is there had been an investigation by the FDA?
Yes, Your Honor, to my knowledge, I'm simply just asking about the investigation on the winery.
No, I sustain the objection.
Yes, Your Honor.
I don't any further testimony about whether there'd been an investigation, what grapes were thrown out. I don't want that testimony won't be allowed. Let's just proceed.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Lewis, to wrap it up, could you just describe your experience working at Peony Estates as an employee?
Of course. Harper, of course, had some issues running the business sometimes, but overall, there was nothing that I could see that was ill-intentioned with her in her attempts to market her business.
Objection, Your Honor, as to improper character evidence.
Sustain.
Your Honor, at this time, I have no further questions. I pass the witness.
Cross.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, Ms. Lewis, you've been close with the defendant ever since your days at Rosie and Pedro's.
Oh, of course. Harper and I were like a meant to be friendship. We hit it off immediately.
And this is Danny Francasio's winery where you met.
Yes, it is.
Now, you personally hate Danny Francasio.
Well, of course, Danny Francasio not only fired my mother after her honest attempts to just sustain his winery in the best way possible, he's never been a friend of mine.
Now, moving on to the present day. You work at Peony Estates.
Yes.
And you worked there since it opened, Ms. Lewis.
Yes, Harper invited me to come on immediately.
And you oversee the winemaking itself at Peony Estates.
Every aspect, the aging, the bottling, the fermentation, as much as I can.
It's Harper, though, that makes the final decisions.
Well, see, Harper's more in charge of the business, financial, marketing side of things, whereas I'm a little more hands-on with our grapes and all of that aspect.
But Harper is the owner and operator of Peony Estates.
Obviously.
Let's talk about the brand of pesticides that you guys use. Peony Estates uses bug-off pesticide.
Yes, after we switched away from our organic solutions, that's what we began using.
And it was Harper's decision to switch to bug-off pesticide.
Yes, it was.
Now, Harper told you that one of her employees almost died from drinking wine contaminated with pesticides.
You know, I do remember a situation with the seller and taking a sip of wine, but Harper said that they stopped it immediately.
Is it your testimony today that Harper didn't tell you about one of the employees almost dying from drinking wine contaminated with pesticide?
I said that I am aware of that situation.
Okay, let's move on. The defendant also told you that she was aware it can be fatal.
Yes.
And the defendant mentioned that she knew pesticide couldn't be seen in wine when they were mixed together.
Yes, you can't tell.
And the defendant mentioned that it can't be smelled either in the wine.
Yes.
Let's move on to the wedding. It was your impression that Genesis and the defendant didn't get along.
Yes, everyone was pretty aware that Harper was not the biggest fan of Genesis.
And the defendant even told you that she hated Genesis.
Yes, like I said, not a fan.
Further, the defendant repeatedly told you that she wanted the wedding to be called off.
Yes, again, Harper did not like Genesis.
Another time, the defendant even told you that if she could push a button and make Genesis disappear, I'd absolutely do it.
Objection, Your Honor, to needlessly cumulative.
No, that's overruled objection. Let's go ahead.
I'm sorry, could you ask that one more time?
Absolutely. Once the defendant even said that if I could push a button and make Genesis disappear, I'd absolutely do it.
Yes.
And Miss Lewis, you were not present on the day of the rehearsal dinner for Genesis and
No,
Casey.
unfortunately, I was not at Peony Estates on the night of June 7th.
So you didn't actually witness anything that happened that day?
No, I was not there.
Miss Lewis, to wrap it up, if the defendant is found liable, the winery will probably shut down.
Yes, and that will be unfortunate for me, seeing as how it's my place of employment and I own a stake in the business.
Yes. You own 10% of the defendant's winery, do you not?
Yes, that's the stake that I own.
Yeah. You do stand to lose your job if it fails, Miss Lewis.
Unfortunately, yes, I do, but that just means another aspect of employment searching for me.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Okay. Defense?
No redirect, Your Honor. I just asked that my witness step down.
All right, witnesses excused. Next.
Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Harper Martini to the stand.
Proceed.
It's good to see you, Miss Martini. Could you please introduce yourself?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Harper Martini.
What is it that you do, Miss Martini?
Well, I run Peony Estates, which is not only a winery, but also a bed and breakfast.
How long have you owned the winery?
I've owned Peony Estates for 5 whole years now.
Do you have a lot of experience making wine?
I do. When I was at college at Midlands University, I started my wine work at Cumberland Farm. Later down the line, I worked at Rosie and Pedro, and now I own my own business. You could say I'm a wine enthusiast. The more wine I drink, the more enthusiastic I get.
Do you have any children, Miss Martini?
I do, yes. The light of my life, Casey.
Tell me about Casey.
I love Casey with all my heart. She's what's kept me going all these years. She's so smart and caring. She always has amazing ideas for the winery. She is the one who suggested that we add the bed and breakfast. I even dreamed that one day she would take over the winery.
Have there been any major recent events involving Casey?
Well, Casey was supposed to get married to Genesis.
Have you ever interacted with Genesis before?
Well, Casey first introduced us in 2015 as her friend, and the first thing he said to me was Rapid River Valley isn't hip enough for the artsy-fartsy peony.
Objection, Your Honor. Hearsay to the statements of Genesis Petrillo.
Sustained.
Was there ever any conflict between the two of you?
I'm not gonna lie, I didn't like Genesis very much. He would say snide remarks to me, and I really couldn't help but say anything back.
Were you comfortable with the wedding going forward?
You know, I wasn't exactly the biggest fan of the wedding going forward, but I wanted Casey to be happy, and if that's what was gonna make her happy, then that's what I would do. You know what they say, a happy child makes the parents smile.
Were you at peace with Genesis?
Well, not exactly. Genesis continued to be snide and rude and combative, and I continued to be the same to him. The worst is when he left that horrible voicemail.
Would you recognize this voicemail?
Yes, I would.
Your Honor, permission to share Exhibit 8 to the screen. This has been pre-admitted per Stipulation 3.
All right, proceed.
Ms. Martini, is this the voicemail?
Yes,
Who was the voicemail from?
Genesis.
What did Genesis sound like on the phone?
Genesis sounded completely wasted. I could practically smell the alcohol.
Objection, Your
on
Honor.
his breath over the phone.
Speculation to completely wasted. This is a phone call. She wasn't there to actually view Genesis himself, and she cannot testify to his mindset at that time.
Sustained.
Your Honor. Yes, Your Honor.
Sustained. That's just, you've got the exhibit. It's in evidence. So direct whatever you're important to you in that exhibit. Let's move on.
Yes, Your Honor. Miss Martini, how did you feel when Genesis said the items listed in this voicemail to you?
Oh, he said all this stuff about them moving to France and taking my grandchildren and Casey away forever. I was absolutely heartbroken. And Genesis was threatening to whisk away the only person I've truly loved since my husband died, Casey.
Did you believe all these statements to be true?
I mean, I didn't really have a reason not to believe them. I don't think my Casey would try and stay away from me forever, but with Genesis, who knows? He was such a bad influence on her.
Objection, improper character evidence to Genesis Petrillo to being such a bad influence on her.
Sustained.
Yes, Your Honor. Did you do anything about these statements?
I did. I wrote a note. I needed to test Genesis.
What do you mean by testing Genesis?
Well, I needed to make sure that he truly loved my Casey.
Did you want to make sure Casey's best interests were in mind?
Absolutely. That's all I've ever wanted, is for Casey to be as happy and fulfilled as possible.
Did you mention that you wrote a note?
I did. I wrote a note to make sure that Genesis was with my daughter for the right reasons.
Would you recognize this note?
Yes, I would.
Your Honor, permission to now share Exhibit 24 to the screen?
This has been admitted by agreement?
Not yet, Your Honor. I'm about to lay the foundation.
All right. You publish it and then lay your foundation.
Ms. Martini, is this the note?
Yes.
And does it seem to be in the same or substantially same condition as when you last saw it?
I believe so, yes.
Does it look like it's been changed or altered in any way?
No, not that I can tell.
Your Honor, at this time, defense moves to enter Exhibit 24 into evidence.
Did you establish whose handwriting or who wrote it?
Miss Martini already admitted that it was her handwriting and she was the author of the note, Your Honor.
I have no objections to this exhibit, Your Honor.
All right, submitted.
Miss Martini, can you explain what this note is?
So this note was a test for Genesis. I wanted to make sure that he was right for my daughter and didn't value material things over their love.
I see a number 300,000 in here. Can you tell me what that means?
So that was the money I was giving to make sure that he didn't value material things over my daughter. If he took the money, then good. He would be out of our lives and we could get over this whole mess. But if he didn't take the money, then I felt he would truly be ready to marry my Casey.
What did Genesis do when you gave him this note?
Not exactly what I expected. He ended up taking the money and he wanted to marry Casey anyways.
Did you try and make up with Genesis in any other way?
I did. I gave him our newest bottle of wine, the Caro wine.
Why would you give him a bottle of wine?
Well, this was a particularly special bottle of wine. In 2018, we had this incredible year with our Petit Verdot grapes. So I created a special blend with the Petit Verdot, Merlot, and Malbec. The thing that made it was so special is that Casey had named the bottle herself, Cara. Isn't it absolutely beautiful? By giving Genesis this wine, I felt like I was giving a piece of my
Objection
heart.
narrative.
Sustained.
Miss Martini, did you ever believe there was anything in the wine?
I mean, the only thing I really thought to be in the wine was the Petit Verdot, Merlot, and Malbec grapes I mentioned earlier.
To your knowledge, was the wine contaminated in any way?
No.
Miss Martini, did you try and kill Genesis Petrillo?
Absolutely not. I didn't like Genesis, but I would never wish the pain of losing a significant other on my daughter. I've experienced that, and I just couldn't bear the thought even putting Casey through that.
Would you have prevented Genesis from drinking the wine if you thought it was contaminated?
Absolutely. Any decent human being would.
Why would you have done so?
Well, because Genesis made Casey happy, and even though I didn't like him, I still wanted Casey to be happy, and Genesis made her that way.
Have you ever interacted with organophosphate poisoning in the past?
I have. So we use it at our winery, and one time we had sprayed a room, and our employee Kirby Doolittle had taken a glass of wine that had been sitting in that room, and he got really, really sick from that wine.
What did you do as a result of that?
Well, I started being a lot more careful with my pesticides. I took Kirby to the hospital, and from that day forward, I tried to be as careful as I could with my wine.
Let's talk about the wedding rehearsal. Did you present the bottle of wine to Genesis?
I did. Well, my caterer Sam brought the bottles out, but the bottles were from me.
Were there other people around?
There were lots of people there.
Did you happen to see if Genesis poured multiple glasses?
I believe he did pour multiple glasses, but I wasn't sure for who.
Did you look around to see if anyone was drinking the wine?
I did. I saw Genesis drink some, and I think I saw Angel Rodriguez drink a sip.
Did you make any statement or anything that would prevent another person from drinking the wine?
I mean, no. I said the wine was for Genesis, but anyone could have had a glass if they had wanted.
Thank you, Ms. Martini. Your Honor, I have no further questions.
Cross.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, Ms. Martini, you stated on direct examination that your winery uses organophosphate pesticides.
Yes.
You are aware that if someone were to drink a wine contaminated with pesticide, they could become very sick.
Yes, I am aware of that.
And that happened to Kirby Doolittle.
It did. It was absolutely tragic. Thank goodness he was okay.
After just one sip, he almost died.
Yes.
Now, Ms. Martini, Genesis Petrillo died from organophosphate pesticide poisoning. Isn't that correct?
He did, to my knowledge, yes.
And you aren't the biggest fan of Genesis, are you?
No, I'm not.
In fact, you even told Austin Lewis you hated Genesis.
Yes, but I mean, he was a bad influence over my daughter. So
You are happy that Genesis Petrillo is out of your life.
I am happy that he's not being a bad influence over my daughter. So I guess I am happy that difficult personality is out of her life, but I'm not happy he's dead.
Now, I want to move on to the voicemail that Genesis Petrillo sent you. Now, Polk Council, please put Exhibit 8 on the screen. Now, when Genesis sent this voicemail to you, he told you that you would never see him and Casey ever again.
Yeah, he kept slurring his speech and saying all these like really nasty things to me.
That he treated you all so bad.
Objection, Your Honor, to needlessly cumulative. The jury has already seen this document. They've read over it. We don't need all of these statements read again to them.
Your Honor, I'm going to ask about what Ms. Martini felt about these statements.
You can direct her attention to a particular statement and ask her about the statement, but no added emphasis in your voice, no dramatic presentation. Just move to each one, get her response, and let's get through the exhibit. Okay?
Yes, Your Honor. You didn't like when Genesis told you to find someone else to run your sad little winery.
No, I didn't. That actually really hurt my feelings.
You didn't like it when he said you'll die alone at that sad place and no one will care.
No, obviously I didn't.
So in response to this voicemail, you decided to bribe Genesis.
It wasn't a bribe. It was a test. Casey's been asking me for so long to bury the hatchet with Genesis. So I decided after this, I was going to try and turn a new leaf and because of this voicemail, make our relationship better.
All right. And so when you gave this note and $300,000 to Genesis, Genesis decided to keep the note.
Yes.
Co-counsel, please put Exhibit 24 on the screen. Now, you gave Genesis $300,000.
Yes, I did. I hoped that maybe he could move alone to France with this money instead of.
And Genesis gave you the note back on June 7th, right?
Yes.
And it says on this exhibit that you have until the 7th to.
Objection, Your Honor. I'm going to re-raise my objection to needlessly cumulative.
Your Honor, I'm just clarifying for the jury what this number 7 means.
Overruled, but like I said, keep it business, no drama.
Yes, Your Honor. And it says you have until the 7th before we do things the hard way.
Yes. When I was writing this note, I was honestly a little bit upset, but I didn't really mean anything by that. It was kind of empty.
All right, now I want to talk about the wedding rehearsal, June 7th. So on that day, that was the day that you decided to give Genesis that bottle of wine.
Yes, it was a really beautiful gesture in my opinion.
And you recognize this bottle of wine if I showed it to you today?
Yes, sir.
All right, can co-counsel please put Exhibit 2A and 2B on the screen? This is that bottle, isn't it?
Yes.
And the next thing over 2B, that is the wine label, isn't it?
Yes, that's correct.
And these are the items that you gave Genesis.
Yes.
And after you gave these to Genesis, you went to bed.
I did go to bed, yes. I had a long day the next morning. Oh, sorry.
And you woke up at around. Sorry, please continue.
No, I was just saying we had a long day in the morning, so go ahead.
And then you woke up around 2:30 in the morning, right?
I did. I heard that someone had been taken to the hospital from my winery.
And that person did not tell you who went to the hospital.
No, but I had assumed it was Genesis because Genesis was always getting alcohol poisoning. So I just really assumed that they had taken him to the hospital.
So you didn't go to Casey Soto's room, did you?
I don't believe so, no.
No, you went to Genesis Petrillo's room.
I did, yes. I wanted to make sure he was okay and make sure that he might have been the one who was in the hospital.
And when you got inside that room, the room was empty.
Yes.
And all that was on the floor was the empty bottle of Cara wine.
Yes.
And so you picked up that bottle.
I did.
You tore off this label.
I did tear off the label. So the label was actually made out of this really cool biodegradable material, and I wanted to go mix it in with our soil. So
That's a yes to my question. You tore off this label.
Yes, I did tear off this label.
And you threw them both into the trash.
I threw the bottle in the trash, yes, and got rid of the label somewhere else.
And later that morning, Genesis Petrillo died.
He did. It was really sad.
And that bottle, Exhibit 2A, later tested positive for organophosphate pesticides.
Yes, it's my understanding that it was found in a garbage can with pesticide canisters in it. I'm really assuming that's how it had to get contaminated because I really can't think of any other way it would have.
But that's your assumption, yes?
Yes, I think so.
And that is a yes to my question. This bottle later tested positive for organophosphate pesticide.
I mean, it did. I really wish I just hadn't thrown it in that trash. I feel like we wouldn't be in the situation today if I hadn't thrown it in that trash.
And Genesis Petrillo died from organophosphate pesticide poisoning.
He did.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Your Honor, I have nothing more with my witness. I just ask that you can step down.
All right, witness is excused.
At this time, Your Honor, the defense rests its case in chief, and we are ready for closing arguments.
Plaintiff, do you have any more witnesses you want to rebuttal or anything you want to call?
No, Your Honor. We just asked that we get a few-minute recess, time permitting, for to prepare.
Timekeeper?
We have 45 minutes until all lost time, so we can grant anywhere from a 5 to 10-minute recess.
So let's make it 5 unless somebody thinks they need longer.
I'm good with 5, Your Honor.
All right,
Yes,
5 minutes. How's our time, Mr. Timekeeper?
We have 1 minute left currently now for recess.
Thank you.
Well, you're welcome.
While I'm here, Your Honor, I guess we'll just go ahead and do a mic check. Can everyone hear me?
Court can hear you. Assume the jury can.
All right, I'll wait for opposing counsel to be ready.
I'm ready, counsel.
All right.
Timekeeper, whenever you say.
If both parties are ready now, we can proceed.
All right, gentlemen, you may address the jury. Go ahead. Plaintiff.
Your Honor, opposing counsel, and members of the jury, may it please the court. The defendant, Harper Martini, took a step too far. The defendant, Harper Martini, wanted nothing more than for the wedding to be canceled and Genesis Petrillo to be out of the picture. So first, she tried to bully him, constantly criticizing and insulting him to push him out of Casey's life. You should just leave and save this family the headache. Otherwise, I will take you out the hard way. If you ever take my Casey away from me, it'll be the last thing you ever do. And when that didn't work, Genesis held on. She tried to bribe him away. $300,000 to leave my life forever. Otherwise, we'll do things the hard way. You have until June 7th. And when Genesis held on and stayed, on June 7th, the defendant made a choice. Not a mistake, a choice. A choice to take a step too far. Members of the jury, she took out that bottle of pesticide, the button meant to make Genesis disappear, and poisoned that bottle of Cara wine. Not to kill Genesis, but to harm, to make sure the wedding was canceled and Genesis Petrillo was scared off. And regardless of the intent, Miss Martini got exactly what she wanted. The wedding was canceled, and Genesis Petrillo is out of her life. And she is happy about that. Now, we proved, members of the jury, by preponderance of the evidence, meaning more likely than not, that the defendant, Harper Martini, committed an intentional battery against Genesis Petrillo, which means we had to prove 3 elements. The defendant intentionally poisoned that wine, did so knowing it could harm, and that Genesis Petrillo was harmed because of it. So I want to talk about that first element. Intentionally poisoned the wine. Now, we heard from a lot of witnesses today. So I want to start with the first one we heard from, Angel Rodriguez. Now, Angel Rodriguez stated that when he saw Harper Martini the day Genesis died, the first thing she said to him was, "Oh no, Genesis has been poisoned? We have to cancel the wedding. Go tell Casey." Members of the jury, Harper Martini was never told that Genesis was poisoned. She was told someone had gone to the hospital. How did she get that specific? Because members of the jury, she knew exactly who went to the hospital and why. Members of the jury, if Miss Martini didn't do it, then why in the world did the first thing she did when she received a phone call in the middle of the night was to go directly to Genesis Petrillo's room, the man she hated, not Casey Soto's room, the apple of her eye. No, Genesis Petrillo's room. Members of the jury, when she got in there, she took up that bottle, tore off the label, and disposed of the evidence to try to cover up what she had done. And members of the jury, that bottle of pesticide, that bottle of wine later tested positive for organophosphate pesticide. Not just a little bit of pesticide, not for some leftover pesticide in the trash. No, This bottle of pesticide tested nearly double the FDA maximums. I want to talk about that second one. The defendant did so knowing this could harm. And Miss Martini and Austin Lewis both admitted today that a bottle of pesticide can seriously harm someone, that a man almost died just after drinking one sip. And lastly, we had to prove that Genesis Petrillo was harmed because of it. And that's why Dr. Kwan was brought today. Dr. Kwan explained to everyone that Genesis symptoms were caused by organophosphate pesticide poisoning, and not a single other witness in this trial could tell you otherwise. So members of the jury, we've proved our burden. We proved that the defendant, Harper Martini, intentionally poisoned that wine, did so knowing it could harm, and the plaintiff was harmed because of it. Now, I want to talk about Genesis Petrillo for a brief moment. You see, members of the jury, when Genesis Petrillo finally got that bottle of wine, he must have thought to himself that Harper finally decided to bury the hatchet. And with each sip that Genesis drank from that wine, the defendant became one step closer to exactly what she wanted. And eventually, Genesis Petrillo died. The defendant got exactly what she wanted. Genesis Petrillo is out of life forever, and the wedding was canceled. And we proved this to you, members of the jury, by a preponderance of the evidence. That the defendant, Miss Martini, knowingly tried to make Genesis disappear by pressing that button, poisoning that bottle. That she pressed that button to make Genesis disappear, knowing it could harm. And that Genesis Petrillo was harmed because of this. The defendant can't get away with this, and that's why we are here today. We ask at the end of this trial that you find the defendant, Harper Martini, liable for the intentional battery against Genesis Petrillo, because the defendant, Harper Martini, took a step too far to getting what she wanted. Not a mistake, members of the jury, a choice, a step too far. Thank you.
Defense,
May I proceed, Your Honor?
please.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, opposing counsel, Your Honor, may it please the court. The only step that has been taken too far today was by opposing counsel, assuming that Harper Martini was liable in this case of, because everything that they have shown you today were mistakes, not murder. Now, you've heard a lot of facts in trial today, and I want to break down each one of these facts and present to you that picture of what truly happened. Now, I do want to make sure that you understand that when you go back into that jury deliberation room, you understand each individual fact, each individual element that the plaintiff needs to prove to you, and show you why they did not prove any one of those points by preponderance of the evidence. So let's take a dive into exactly what they need to do. This is a case of battery, meaning there are specific elements that they need to prove in order for this Harper Martini to be found liable. First, the plaintiff holds the entire burden in this case. They must prove every single element by a preponderance of the evidence. That means that the plaintiff needs to show that every single element was more likely than not. And have that idea in the back of your mind today. Is each one of these claims more likely than not? If only one of them is not, you must find Harper Martini not liable at the end of trial today. So let's go over each one of the specific elements they need to prove to you to find Harper Martini liable. The first is that Martini intentionally mixed pesticides into the wine. Now let's look at the facts today. You heard from Angel Rodriguez that immediately after Genesis Petrillo had been found to be poisoned, Sam Arnold believed that she had poisoned the food. She was the one who was nervous. Now ask yourself why. The reason why is that all of the evidence has shown that the wine bottle was not contaminated before Genesis Petrillo drank that wine. Let's look at the facts. Genesis Petrillo was handed a bottle of wine by Harper Martini during the wedding reception. That bottle of wine was not only drunk by Genesis Petrillo, Angel Rodriguez also said that they had a sip. You've heard throughout trials today numerous times that an individual having even so much as a sip of this wine has fallen nearly to the point of death. And yet, Angel Rodriguez did not have any symptoms whatsoever. This was confirmed by Dr. Kwan seeing Angel Rodriguez at the hospital where Angel Rodriguez was standing, walking, and there was no signs of burning on Angel Rodriguez's lips. Furthermore, you also heard from Dr. Kwan that there is a chance that any other food contents could have mixed in the stomach and therefore caused the wine to come up as a false positive. And the reason being is because when that bottle was disposed of in the trash can, there was another item present in that trash can, and that were empty pesticide bottles, to which Austin Lewis testified that that would have been the source of contamination. That is the reason why the pesticides were in the bottle. Martini did not intentionally mix pesticides into the wine. Next, they must show you by preponderance of the evidence that Martini acted with the intent that Genesis would ingest the pesticides and be poisoned. Martini did no such thing. Miss Martini did not act with any intent whatsoever. She was wanting to have Genesis not be in a relationship anymore. But that is not murder. That is not battery. Just because you do not like someone does not mean that you are automatically going to go to the fullest extent of bringing out violence on another individual. And they did not show that Martini was intentionally acting that Genesis would ingest those pesticides and be poisoned. Furthermore, they must show you by preponderance of the evidence that Genesis drank the wine and ingested the pesticides, just as Martini had intended. But as you've seen today, multiple people at that table had a sip of that wine. Multiple people there had come into contact with that wine. But it was not the wine that caused Genesis's death. And the reason being, there was no pesticides at the time of that gift being given. Once again, go back to Sam Arnold, who specifically mentioned that they were nervous because their food might have been contaminated. Go back to Dr. Kwan, who said that there's a chance that the food had mixed in the stomach and caused that wine to be a false positive. Therefore, they did not prove by preponderance of the evidence that Genesis drank that wine and ingested the pesticide. The next element that they need to show by preponderance of the evidence is that as a result of ingesting that pesticide, Genesis died around 9:27 a.m. Now, we're not contesting this fact. It's very clear that Genesis died from pesticide poisoning. But I want to bring up a fact mentioned in the closing arguments. They mentioned that Martini had immediately run to the room and said, "Oh, Genesis was poisoned." Now, why did she do such a thing? The reason being was the same thing that was mentioned by Angel Rodriguez during their testimony. Angel Rodriguez mentioned that Genesis Petrillo suffered from alcohol poisoning on a common basis. They were a drinker, a heavy drinker, and this was not an unexpected occurrence. Therefore, for Martini to say that Genesis Petrillo was suffering from poisoning, specifically alcohol poisoning, it's nothing out of the ordinary. Let's go into the fifth element. They must show that by each one of those points previously, that it was a direct and proximate cause, the result of that foregoing, that the plaintiff suffered harm. But because they cannot show each of those individual points by preponderance of the evidence, it's simply not true, and they cannot substantiate that point. Again, they must show all of these specific elements by preponderance of the evidence, and they have not done it to you today. And so when we look at the actual facts of today's trial, when we look at the actual timeline of events, there's only one clear picture that can be observed. Harper Martini gifted a bottle of wine to Genesis Petrillo. That bottle was not contaminated. Once that bottle was thrown away in the trash, it was contaminated, corroborated by witnesses on both sides. And that caused Genesis Petrillo to die due to food poisoning, or food contaminated with poison by Sam Arnold. It's more likely than not that that occurred. And as a result, ask that you find Harper Martini not liable at the end of trial today. Thank you.
Plaintiff, closing.
Yes, Your Honor. I have a minute and 6 seconds for rebuttal. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Members of the jury, I hate to say it, but opposing counsel made a mistake. They made a mistake in their assumptions. Because members of the jury, they failed to remember that according to stipulation number 9, both parties agreed that all leftover food was tested, and none of it tested positive for organophosphate pesticide. So where did the pesticide and Genesis system come from? Well, opposing counsel also wants to say that it came from empty bottles of pesticide in the trash. Well, members of the jury, how in the world did pesticide get in the wine if those bottles were empty? I want you to use your common sense, the logic, the facts. Opposing counsel talked a lot about that, but they didn't present to you. They didn't bring you the facts. They didn't bring you the common sense. They brought you their mistakes. The defendant, Harper Martini, took a step too far. Find the defendant liable for the intentional battery against Genesis Petrillo. Thank you.
Well, both sides rest and close. I guess
Yes,
we're
Yes, Your Honor.
all right, submitted to the jury.
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Judge, both of the scoring judges have submitted their ballots.
All right, I'm not familiar with the Sumer. Does this result in a where each side they present their results, or is there discussion among the various parties, critiques, criticism? What would be proper next?
The next step, Your Honor, is that. Oh.
Yeah, we're just going to have some brief comments. Just short, talk about things that we liked or didn't like.
Yeah, so we've got to wait until I get the all clear from Elliot, just to make sure that there's nothing wrong with the ballots, and then we can give comments.
Okay. I'll leave the timekeeper, since you're more familiar with it, if you'll let us know when it's time for I have no comments, of course, for it. So.
Yes, Your Honor.
It's a time for interesting stories. Everybody's got the interesting stories. I suppose we could pass the time. Never mind.
I'm trying to think of one. I didn't want to unmute though. Nah, that might reveal my name. I can't.
Where is everybody? Everybody spread out all over the country?
We can't say until after ballots are submitted, but we'll tell you when they are.
Okay.
Thank you for judging though. That was good. I had fun this round.
It's an interesting set of facts, I'll have to admit. I kept having to struggle between teams, whether a civil proceeding versus a criminal proceeding. Keep it in perspective.
Yeah, it's so weird, and like we have to like try to emphasize enough, you know.
We're good to go. Asher. So yeah, I'll go ahead and introduce myself, and then, like Asher said, just give a couple of quick overview comments. First of all, congratulations for completing the tournament. Good job. Obviously it's virtual, so it's probably been difficult and pretty stressful on everybody to kind of cope with that, but I thought everybody did a good job. My name's Luke. I'm a 2L at Baylor Law here. I did mock all in undergrad at Baylor also, so I'm pretty familiar with this whole scene. I've helped run this tournament a couple of times before. Obviously it was in person, but I had a pretty good grasp of what was going on. Overall, I thought everybody did good. I'll just give a couple of quick criticisms, since I think telling y'all what you did great wouldn't be very helpful moving forwards, but maybe some more big picture criticisms might help for the next tournament coming down the road. I know regionals might be coming up. Don't end any crosses or directs on objections. If you get objected to and then you lose the objection and that objection gets sustained, don't then end. It looks really weak for you as an attorney. Always try to have a backup question in your pocket just in case you do have something go wrong. Your cross or direct doesn't end on kind of a bad note. You kind of want to always end on a high note, so that no matter what happens, the jury has that as kind of their last thing in their mind. And then the next thing is, specifically with this virtual format, witnesses in particular need to talk into the camera and not look down at who you're talking to. Specifically as the jury myself, it was kind of difficult, I know, because I wasn't on the screen, but because you weren't talking into the camera, it felt like you were having a conversation with your attorney, which is not what would happen in the actual courtroom. You know, your attorney would be way over there and you would be talking to the jury themselves. So that's just kind of a point moving forwards. I don't know if any more tournaments in the future will be virtual, but if they are, just kind of be cognizant of that. Also, be aware that this isn't a criminal proceeding. I don't think this is a criminal battery. I'm pretty sure this is civil, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, I just know we had a couple of terms that might in vernacular seem okay to throw around, but you can't really from a legal perspective. So like murder, you can't say that they attempted to murder somebody. That's very different than civil battery, which is just the intent to do some kind of harmful conduct, not to take somebody's life. And as along with that, you're not convicting the defendant, you're just finding them liable. So you're not convicting them of battery. That's for criminal battery. This is civil, so you're just finding them liable. And then last thing is, if you win an objection and the witness, like a narrative, and the witness just talked for 3.5 minutes, motion to strike the objection or the answer. Otherwise, that answer will stay on the record, and it's great that you objected to it and your objection's on the record, but so is the witness's answer. And since you won, you kind of have the ball in your court. And since you don't want that entire story on the record, get it off. That's just kind of a point of advocacy. But overall, I thought everybody did great. And I'll stick around after we're done in case anybody has individual questions for me as well. So.
Awesome. Yeah, I totally agree with everything Luke said. My name is Asher. I'm also a 2L at Baylor. And also, yeah, congratulations, you guys. This has been an exhausting weekend. I know a lot of sitting patiently and a lot of, careful planning that is finally, hopefully come to fruition here. But I have a few comments. I think that both teams have a lot that they can improve on going forward. Beginning with the attorneys, I think that we got better with this as the trial went on, but there were so few objections. There were many opportunities where there could have been objections, and I think that always shows just a lack of practice and a lack of awareness of all of the tools you have at your dispense. Also, this is a somewhat subjective pet peeve, but it's very universal. If you were someone who was reading off of a script, whether it be your opening arguments or you have a very set script for your examinations, it was very obvious that you were reading. And on Zoom, you know, people, I think, feel that's a great crutch. You can now pretend you're looking at the camera, but really you're looking at the script. We can see. And so get off the scripts. Also on examinations, I think there was a lot of fluff that could be chopped out. I know that there was a lot of stress going into that final examination in the plaintiff's case in chief, so few time. That's because I think there was a lot that both sides could have chopped out in their examinations of the first two witnesses. Get to the meat. Everybody wants to be Tom Cruise and take, you know, the witness down a long trail. But if it's been asked and answered, you know, on direct exam, then you don't need to talk about it on cross. All right, the negligence per se argument. This has come up once or twice. I think that teams, there's a way to handle it. Personally, I think you should avoid your client. This is the defense. You should avoid making your client liable for anything. If you can pin it on the decedent's own alcohol poisoning, then do that. But when they're saying this evidence they're trying to use to prove negligence per se, you just have to say, we're not trying to prove negligence per se of our own client, Your Honor. We're just showing that there's no intent, which is an element of battery, and you keep it around that intent element of battery. That's an idea. Finally, on intent, be careful with talking about having knowledge that it would harm Genesis, because that's a different standard than battery. If you're trying to prove battery, intent is more than recklessness or gross negligence. That's trying to prove, it sounded like. So that's a lot there. But overall, I love the witnesses. I think that honestly may have made or break you know, the ultimate decision here. Very, very good job. Thanks. If you have any comments or criticisms you'd like to share, feel free.
Being no further, everybody did a good job. Thank you. Enjoyed being a relatively inept judge, but I hope I did listen closely, tried to lend some credence to it. So thank you. I don't know is there anything you're waiting for? Is this, is there a general session where there's a overall ranking of different teams? Does this conclude it? Can we end it on our own, or are we waiting for the director to get back to us?
We're all good to go, Your Honor.
Yeah, I think we're good to go.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. And
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'll hang around too with Luke in case anybody has any questions.
Hey there. So I thought I would stay on a minute and I guess just ask for, I know you guys submit like more specific personal comments, but I feel like on cross, or actually when my witness was being crossed, I probably could have been stronger, because I didn't raise many objections. In fact, it was just two, and one of them, the balancer, and I don't mind admitting it was to break flow. It was vaguely related and it was to break flow. But what could I have done better?
Okay, which you crossed?
It was, my witness was Dr. Kwan, and it was on the cross of my witness.
Okay.
I had written down for your directive, Dr. Kwan, I think that you have, you're good at writing the scripts. I think that your examinations were very clean. And compared to maybe some others, I think that you got to the point a lot faster. So I didn't have any negative criticism of that examination. Do you have anything, Luke?
No, we're talking about the cross, right?
I think she's talking about the direct examination of Dr. Kwan. Is that what you said a second ago?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't realize I was muted. But when my witness, Dr. Kwan, or the witness, Dr. Kwan, was being crossed by the defense attorney.
Oh, when he was being crossed. Okay.
I didn't realize I was muted. Sorry.
I mean, witness protection, really it'll depend on the judge, but my thing is if the attorney's clearly being blatantly aggressive with them, you can object, because I think judges will look for that. But if it's kind of more of a subtle thing and they're kind of getting to the point and you can tell your witness has a good grasp on it, I think it's fine to just let them go. I thought that the cumulative objections, I like those. I always did those when I was in undergrad for mock, specifically if people are just reading from documents that were already admitted into evidence. I think those are a great way to break up crosses if you can get the opportunity to do them. I don't know who your witnesses will be in the future. But yeah, I think I don't really think it's a negative point on you if you don't do more to break it up if there's not more that you can do in the first place.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And I appreciate you guys judging today.
Yeah, sure, no problem.
All right. Well, if there's nothing else, best of luck. See you in law school and see you in court.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.